Oh my gosh, today's color transformation was literally one of my favorite color transformations I have ever done. What's up? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jamie Dana and I am here to support you on your hair journey. So in today's video, I have a model that has dark level 4 brunette hair with a little bit of grown out highlights, and we are taking her to a red copper hair transformation. I'm going to be showing you how to formulate for a color correction like this and the placement that I use to make this super simple and easy. Now, this video is actually from the vault, which means I filmed this video a while ago and never released it here on YouTube, so you get something a little bit special today. So without further ado, let's dive on in. All right, so this is our starting canvas. As you can see, she is a natural level 4, and then she has some of these kind of grown out highlights that have been done previously. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be lifting her natural color and then kind of toning down some of these ends and giving her these nice pops of copper. I'm really excited to do this transformation. It has been a while since I've done one of these, and redheads was something that I used to specialize in, so I am really excited. So let's go mix up. Okay, so we are gonna mix up. Now, I have actually spent quite a bit of time formulating what we are gonna be doing for her hair. So what I did was I actually went through and I got my color book out, and I wanted to make sure that I was really going through with my color theory to make sure that we weren't gonna end up with things like hot roots, and we were gonna make sure that everything lifts the way that we need it to get our final tone. So when I'm formulating color, a lot of times what I'll do is I will actually write down my game plan. And this is really helpful if you use client cards and you write them down, but sometimes when I'm formulating, I actually have to physically write it down to make sure that I'm mixing up what I want and I'm mixing up the proper ratios. So I have already formulated what we want her roots to be, what we want her mids to be, what we're gonna do at the ends, and then what we're gonna do at the bowl. So we have a full game plan kind of going into this after we did the consultation. So what I'm gonna be mixing up right now is her roots and her mids. Then we're gonna come back, we're gonna go do her ends at the chair. We'll mix that up in a little bit, and then we'll go through and gloss everything over if everything goes according to plan. And also knowing when you have a game plan, sometimes things don't go according to plan. You have color, you have other things that are going on in the hair. So sometimes you formulate a game plan and then you have to come up with a plan B halfway through, and that's okay too. So we're gonna go with our plan A, hope that it all works out. And then of course, if we need to come back, we can always just formulate game plan B as well. All right, so for her roots, we're mixing up equal parts of 5R and 5RR max. So I went ahead and I mixed up 10 volume and 20 volume to equal 15 volume because we want a little bit of lift, but we don't want it to be too much. And then we're gonna do, like I said, equal parts of 5R and 5RR max. Now, the reason why I'm not doing just 5RR max straight is because there's a lot of pigment in that, and I wanna make sure that we don't end up with what's called hot roots, where her roots are really bright and then it's kind of a little bit more dull. Because the head has natural heat, it's going to lift a little bit stronger. So we know that going in. So that's why I'm doing a little bit of 5R, a little bit of 5RR max, just to get a little bit of that pump of color, but not too much so that we have hot roots. So that's for her roots. And now I'm gonna mix up her mids. And for her mids, we are gonna be mixing up 6KR and 6KG. Equal parts. I love 6KG. It's one of my favorite formulas that I use, but I did want a little bit more pop with it as well. So that's why we're going to be doing a little bit of that 6KR just to give it a little bit more of that copper pop. So let's mix these up and head on over. Okay, so when we are prepping our client for a service like this, we want to make sure that every square inch is covered because we're going to be doing a lot of color. This is also a reason why I always wear an apron, and I usually wear dark colors on days that I have colors like this because color gets everywhere. We want to make sure that we're protected. So I always make sure that my client has a robe on, and then I'm always going to put a towel around my client's neck, clip it in front, making sure that it's not too tight, but this way it ensures that color, we can get it on the client and it's not going to get on the client's clothes or anything like that. Another thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna use the Framar Dye Defender, and we're gonna apply it to our clients just around her hairline. This makes sure that we can not have a ton of staining, so I always just apply it right to my glove, and then I'll go in and apply it just right to their forehead. Now, you wanna make sure not to get it too far down, because a lot of times clients have their makeup on and stuff, but this will definitely help with staining, especially because we are doing red color. You know, that stuff tends to stain. So I usually like to go right around the hairline, just kind of right around the back of the neck. I don't go all the way down to the nape, but just kind of around the back, on the ears, and make sure that's nice and clean. Okay, so we're gonna go in and we're gonna go in with our root color. That's the 5R and 5RR Max. And usually when I'm doing even just like a root touch-up, I don't section out the hair. I just go straight into it. So with this, we're only really gonna apply it for like that first inch. Again, this is the area that tends to have a lot of those hot roots. So we're just going in and applying this, and then our mid color is gonna be our color that really shines. So this is just going in. We wanna make sure that it's really saturated, especially too, because she does have a tiny bit of gray. We do want to make sure that that's getting covered as well, but we do want to make sure that this is very, very saturated. So I'm just kind of going in and taking very thin sections in between. You can see they're just about under 1/2 inch, and we're going in, saturating this through, and we're going to go through and apply this to her entire head. So as you can see, one of the things that's really important, and this goes for just any regular root touch-up client, I mean, really this is the same process that I would be doing for a gray retouch, is you wanna make sure that you're still staying very clean, especially because we are working with red hair color. But even still, if we were working with just, you know, a level 5, a level 6N, we wanna make sure that we're working very clean. And this is gonna be something that's really important for the clients to start to trust you, especially as you start to do more of these types of clients. These are your bread and butter clients, and you want to make sure that you're just getting in there really nice and clean and keeping your sections clean. So as you can see, as I'm kind of laying the hair down, I'm doing it in a very clean manner. I'm not dragging color down. I'm just applying it right to the root. Even still, the tail comb of my brush, if it ends up getting dirty, I will just kind of wipe it off on my station and keep moving on. But I'm just working very, very cleanly. Again, not dragging any color down or squishing any of the hair, working in really nice, clean, precise sections. So now that we've gotten to the end of this section, I just like to usually do the hairline. And then what I'm gonna go do is I'm just gonna slowly bring these down. So what I'm doing is I'm just connecting my finger to the end of my tail comb right here, bringing this whole section down. I'm not doing tiny, tiny sections, but this again just helps keep it clean and make sure that we're not dragging down any color. And then before I move on to the back, what I like to do is I like to take my towel and just clean up the hairline. So you can see that she's got a little bit dragging down. And again, that's why we use that Dye Defender. It really helps just make sure that we clean up the hairline. So I'll go through, clean up the hairline, make sure that the ears are nice and clean before we move on to the back. Because again, your client is gonna be sitting here looking at themselves in the mirror, and if it's really messy, it just looks sloppy. So we wanna clean this up as much as possible so that they have a nice experience. Okay, so now we've moved on to the back. So what I like to do is I just like to section out kind of the front section from the back where we left off, so we're not accidentally missing anything. And now you can see that we have kind of this back section. So what I'll do is I'll just go through and apply it right to that root area. But I also wanna make sure that we're not squishing down hair on top of this freshly done color, especially because we want to make sure that we're not going too dark right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply a foil right here on top, and that makes sure that when I'm putting the hair down, we're not accidentally squishing any dark color onto that. So we're just going to go through, apply this color to the roots in this back section, and then once we're done with that, we'll get on to the mids. Okay, so before we go on and apply her mid shaft, what I'm gonna do is I actually am gonna leave out her money pieces because we wanna brighten these up a little bit. So I'm just gonna apply them in a foil with conditioner to help make sure that these stay nice and bright. And then when we go back and do the ends, we're gonna brighten them up a little bit, but I just don't wanna have them accidentally touch any color or anything like that. So we're just literally putting them in foils, nice and easy, just to keep them clean. Because I got squished on color, we're just gonna do this and bring them down. Go like that so it's nice and clean. Now we're gonna apply her mids. Okay, so I'm gonna apply a little foil here, just again to protect this because we're actually starting on the bottom of these sections and working our way up. It's just gonna keep it a lot cleaner than trying to work our way down. So what we're gonna do is, for this midsection, is I have my little tail comb here and I'm just gonna kind of comb down those roots and we're gonna apply the mids all the way down till about where you start to see that lightness come through. And then we're gonna leave these ends out because we're gonna do something a little bit fun just to add a little pop of brightness. So I'm really not bringing it down too much because it's naturally gonna drag on its own. But the biggest thing that you wanna make sure that you're doing here is making sure that it's saturated. So you can see I'm just barely applying it just a couple inches down, but then I'm going to take my fingers and really work it in just to make sure that it's very, very saturated. And again, because I know it's gonna drag down, I'm going to kind of let it just kind of stop right in there. Now, one thing, this type of technique gets very messy, so you want to keep an extra towel on hand with a little bit of water. It'll just ensure that you can keep things clean as possible in a very, kind of messy color application. So you can see as I'm working through my sections, I'm working through pretty thick sections here. I'm not doing, half-inch sections at this point because I'm using my hand to really make sure that we're getting into that section. So just applying it in there. You can see I'm kind of like working it through with the brush a little bit, and then we're going to take our fingers and really work it into that root area. Now remember, this is 30 volume, so this is naturally going to start to lift her natural color, which is really cool. We don't have to use lightener to lift this natural color. This is going to kind of do it on its own, so that's super fun. So we're going to keep working up this section. I'm going to do the other section, and then we're going to work through the back. Okay, so now we've gone through, we've applied it to her roots, to her mids, and you can see I've left a lot of her ends out. So what I'm gonna do is we're actually gonna mix up a clay lightener. And the reason why I wanna do this is her ends are, like a level 7, but I want them to be a little bit more bright and have a little bit more pop to them. So we're gonna just pull a little bit of clay lightener through some of her ends, and then I'm gonna pull a low light of the mid shaft color down through her ends. So we have a little bit of that low light, a little bit of that brighter chunky highlight, because we really want that dimension. And I think when it comes to redheads, you want to see a little bit more dimension than something like a baby light. So we do want a little bit more chunky pieces, a little bit more of that dark and light and contrast in there. So that's what we're gonna do. And then we'll rinse it out. So for her ends, we're gonna be mixing up the Kenra clay lightener, and I'm gonna do 30 volume. Now you might be thinking 30 volume on her level 7 ends, that feels like a lot, but because they're just needing a little bit more kick, it's clay lightener. It really doesn't process the way that a traditional lightener would. It's more open air, so we just want a little bit of brightness, but her roots and mids don't have that much time to process. So that's why we're just gonna go in with 30 volume. I would not recommend doing 30 volume in a traditional lightener, but again, this is more of a clay lightener, so that's why we're gonna be able to do that. Now, when you're mixing up clay lightener, again, the consistency is going to be a little bit more different than a traditional lightener. We want it to be a little bit more like a paste. So with this, I always go off of consistency. I never go off of mixing ratios because for me, I want to make sure that it is going to be the consistency that I need. So I usually like to make sure that it's like more of like a paste, a thicker paste. So typically you're going to have a lot more clay lightener than you would developer. So that feels like a good consistency to me. I mix it with a brush, but some people do mix it with a whisk or even a comb, but totally up to you. So yeah, that feels pretty good to me. And we'll head back over. Okay, so now that we're gonna go through and apply her ends, I am gonna make sure that I'm really protecting her. So I'm gonna use one of these Framar backwards bibs. These things are great to really just keep everything nice and clean. They're awesome for if you're doing vivid colors, things like that, but they just ensure that you're not getting it all messy on your chair and all of that stuff. Okay, so for these pops of highlights, I'm just gonna kind of section out a little bit down here, and we're gonna start from the bottom and work our way up. Like I said, we're just really going through and popping out some of her ends here. Now for this, because we are just applying it, you know, kind of with the color, I'm just gonna drag down the color a little bit here. And you could use a balayage board if you wanted to, but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna use my hands because I do wanna make sure that we're getting it in there and getting it really saturated. So I'm using my hands and just kind of blending it through that way. And I'm really only applying this to the spots that are already lightened. And I'm just kind of feathering it through with my fingers here, making sure that those ends are very saturated. Okay, so what I've been doing is I've just been kind of going through and I'm applying her mid shaft color again. I did mix up just a little bit more, so I had a fresh batch of it. So I'm kind of applying that through. I've been combing it through. And then kind of when we get down to these ends, you can see that we have, you know, a little bit of warmth in there, but we just want to, again, pop it up just a little bit more. So I'm going through and I actually am blending this up into the color. Now, I wouldn't normally do this if we were doing like a blonde transformation or anything that needed to be any type of ash, but because we actually want to work with some of the warmth, and again, that's why we're going in with a clay lightener. I'm not really too worried about overlapping on her light pieces, but also her dark pieces, because we do want some of that blanche and that brassiness to kind of come through. That's one of the benefits of working with red hair color is you really get to work with a lot of those warm tones. So I'm going through and applying in these thicker sections. Again, I would not normally do thicker sections like this. If I was going through and doing a blonde transformation, this could end up being very, just very warm. But the big thing that I am making sure that I am doing is making sure that these ends are saturated. So going through and just making sure that sometimes with the clay lightener, it can be really thick. So there can be pockets inside where things aren't saturated. So in the ends, I am making sure to saturate them. And then when we get to kind of this spot where it's mixing the color into the lightener, I'm just kind of blending it up in there and literally using my fingers and my brush to blend it together. So kind of just doing this, and you can kind of start to see it kind of meld together. You can kind of see that where it starts to blur that line. Now again, this is one of the areas where you do have to be a little bit careful. This is more of an advanced technique because we want to make sure that we don't get blotchiness in there. So just kind of blending it in there. I will sometimes check the back too to make sure that there's not like anything that's unsaturated down here that I'm blending up into color. So we're just going to blend that through. And as I'm going, you can kind of start to see some of my other sections that I've done the same thing on. You can see them already starting to lighten, which is amazing. And then you can see that blend. And sometimes I'll just go back through and just kind of blendy again. So we're gonna let this sit and I'm gonna keep working up the head, but it's already looking so good. So as far as sectioning goes, it might be kind of hard to tell, and so I wanted to just pop back on here and tell you exactly what I'm doing. So I've been doing some diagonal back and then straight across, and diagonal back into a V section and straight across. So this is now my straight across. It's kind of hard to tell because it's sectioned off to the side there, but I'm just going through and I'm gonna comb this through. You can see we've got some brightness in there. I'm gonna add that color again through to the mids, kind of blend it through, clean off my hands real quick, and then go in and add our lightener. So honestly, it kind of is varying in our pattern of the diagonal backs. This one was a low light, a piece that has been left out. I'm just leaving her natural ends right there. And then some of those ones we are going through and lightening with our clay lightener. Okay, so for this last side section, all I've been doing is I've just been doing diagonal back sections so that we're angling it away from her face a little bit and doing the same thing. So just kind of applying a little bit more more of that mid just to refresh it because it's, you know, been sitting on for a little while at this point, and then going through and saturating the ends. Now I didn't do every section. I did leave one as like a low light where I'm not pulling it all the way through, but I'm also not lightening the ends as well. So I did do that just so that it doesn't end up being so like blonde right around her face. And one thing you will notice, so I am going through and I'm just kind of wiping down my fingers as I kind of get to this point where I applied her lightener and then kind of it's mixing with the color, but I want it to blend just a little bit more. So I'm cleaning off my hands and then I'm going back in and just really, you can see how it's like not quite as blended as I want. And I'm just literally blending that in there. And you can see just the difference that that kind of makes of just blending it through with a clean glove. So we're gonna finish up this section and I'll show you what we're gonna do with that final money piece. Okay, so now that we've finished her entire head, I did pull out her money piece area and they were in those foils with the conditioner, as you remember. So I went through and I just put a little bit of water on them and cleaned it off with the towel so we don't have the conditioner acting as a barrier. So all I'm gonna do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to apply our clay lightener in here. And because this is the last section and we do want these pieces to pop, I'm gonna blend it in with the clay lightener, but I am just gonna put it in a little foil just to kind of incubate it just for a few minutes because the rest of her hair is almost done processing and we do want to bump this up just a little bit here. And I am blending this piece up just a little bit higher than all of the rest. As you can see, the rest was kind of about, you know, mid level there, but this one we're going to go pretty high up. So blending it all into that root area. And then we've got a foil right here. We're just literally going to let her, going to fold that foil over. Perfect. Okay, so now that I've gone through and I applied all of the color, I am going back through and just kind of checking to make sure that my blends look good. As you can see, at this point, this back section is gonna slowly start to dry out because it is a clay lightener, and that's okay because we really don't want her ends to lift up much lighter than this anyways, because when we go back and apply the color, we wanna make sure that it lasts really good. So all I'm doing is I'm just going through and just making sure that everything is really blended. There was a little section right here that was just not as blended as I liked, so I'm just going through and kind of making sure that it's all blended. If it doesn't look blended now, it'll look splotchy later. So you can kind of see like this spot, it's pretty blended, but I'm just gonna go through, just reapply that clay lightener right in there, just a tiny, tiny bit, not too much, and don't drag it up too much into the color, but just kind of blending that through just a little bit more. This will help kind of just make sure that it's really nice and blended for you. Okay, so we are going to rinse her out. So what I'm gonna do is before we take her back to the bowl, I'm gonna take this little guy off and we're gonna slowly bring her back. You can lay back for me. And I'm gonna rinse these money pieces very last just to make sure that they don't get any bleeding or anything because we do wanna keep those as bright as possible. So she ended up processing for about 30-ish minutes. And again, that's just because a lot of those ends were on there for a long time and the roots were done at that point. So the last pieces we were waiting on were her money piece. So as I'm rinsing her, I'm making sure really to focus in on that root area because we did have a lot of color in there. And a lot of times these kind of colors do take a little bit while to rinse. So you wanna make sure that you're getting really good in there and really getting that root area clean because it does take a lot. So one of the things that I really like to do, even when I have just like a root touch-up color, but specifically if I have a direct dye or something that's red, I like to get my hands a little bit wet and I'll go in and before I even touch the hair with water or anything, I'm gonna go and massage out the color, the hairline right here. And this is gonna help lift it out because you're literally using the color to lift the color out of the skin. If you go in and start applying shampoo or working it through that way, it actually can stain the skin a little bit more. So we're just gonna go through and work it out. And at this point, it's been on for a little while, so it's a little bit dry. That's why I got my gloves a little bit wet, but we're just gonna massage it out. And this is really gonna help lift that staining off the skin, especially right around the hairline. And then what I'll do is I will get right up into that hairline. And as you can see, it's literally just lifting away that color. This is really key, especially for these red type of color corrections. Okay, so with her, I ended up rinsing for about 5 minutes. Now I know when you're first starting out, doing rinsing like this and doing shampoos like this can sometimes feel a little intimidating. So the key that you want to keep in mind is you want the water to be rinsing almost clear. Now with red, you will still get some of that, you know, a little bit of residual color in there. So you can see it's not quite rinsing clear, but you don't want to be having a lot of color still coming out. So I'm making sure that I'm cleaning up behind the ears, underneath the neck. That is really, really key. And one of the things that I always am looking for is sometimes I'll even just section the hair and look at the scalp to make sure that the scalp doesn't have like color still on it. It's gonna have a little bit of staining, right? But we wanna make sure that there's no like color on the scalp. So a lot of times colors like this will take a lot longer to rinse than a normal color would, and that's okay. Make sure to take your time because you don't wanna have that residual color on the client's scalp or on their neck. Another thing that I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to just take a little bit of our color stain remover, and I like to do this again just before we even get into shampooing. I'm just going to go and apply this right here, and as you can see, this is already just lifting away a lot of that staining right here on her skin. And just cleaning it up nice and clean. Obviously with this kind of color, you might not be able to get all of it out, but if you can get a lot of it, that's gonna help too, especially for photos and things like that. And you don't want the client going home with big color stains. So something just to keep in mind. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to shampoo her hair first, just to make sure that we're getting it really clean. And then we're gonna go in and we're gonna mix up her toner. Okay, so for her toner, for her ends, I'm gonna be mixing up equal parts of 8C and 6CB. And I want it to be ideally a level 7 because I don't want it to fade too much and have it be too bright and then, you know, be something that's gonna really just fade too much for her. So I think the level 7 is gonna be great, and that little kick of C I think is gonna be super perfect. So let's go apply this. Okay, so we have already towel dried her hair, and I'm just gonna go through and apply this kind of starting from the bottom, and we're really only applying it to the ends. We don't need to really go through the mid shaft because that has already been colored. So we're just gonna apply it through here and get going. Now, one thing you will notice with redheads is, as you can see, when we rinsed out her roots and her mids, it kind of stains these ends a little bit. So you kind of are already getting that like pre-fill of what you want. And then now we're just kind of filling that in and really locking in that toner color in the bottom. So that's the fun thing about redheads is they kind of do the work for you, and you're not fighting against so much of that warmth as you would be with a brunette or a blonde or anything like that. So I love doing redheads. I think they're super fun. They can be a little bit challenging, but once you start to understand formulas and really start to understand what works for you, I think you'll really start to like to do redheads as well. Okay, so now we have gone through and applied it to her entire head, just again, kind of more on those mids to the ends. And as you can see, just a few minutes in, it's already processing so beautifully. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so, so good. So we're gonna let this sit on for about 15 minutes, which is about the approximate time that they recommend for shades, 15 to 20 minutes. We're gonna let that sit on, let it really just bake in there, and then we'll rinse her out. All right, so she's processed for about 15 minutes, and I know it's a little bit hard to see with the lighting, but you can just see it's just a nice solid color. It feels very solid and beautiful. And now we're gonna rinse it out. We're gonna shampoo and condition, and then we'll finish her up. is our final result. As you can see, her hair has so much beautiful dimension. And one of the things that I think I love the most is how her existing highlights pulled in that 6KR and the 6KG just so beautifully and then blended out into that end toner color. I love how much dimension she has, from the depth that she still has from her natural into these beautiful bright ends. Oh, we're obsessed with how it turned out, and I love this formulation. Aren't you just as obsessed as I am? I love how it turned out. Such a fun transformation, and I would love to know from you in the comments, what was one thing you learned from today's video? Go ahead and let me know. I think it's always super helpful for me to hear what's helping you. And if you haven't watched the other videos here on my YouTube channel, I'm gonna link one of my favorite ones coming up next for you to check out. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.